Elias has taken a magnesium supplement every night for 4 months. Same time, same routine, right before bed. He started because of sleep that never felt quite deep enough and the occasional muscle cramp that would wake him up at 2 in the morning. 4 months later, still not sleeping great, still getting the occasional cramp. His conclusion, like a lot of people's, was simple. Magnesium just doesn't work for him. Here's the question worth asking instead. What if the mineral was never the problem? Magnesium supplementation has one of the widest gaps between should theoretically help and actually helps in practice of any common supplement. And the reason has almost nothing to do with whether magnesium itself does what the research says it does. It has to do with whether the magnesium Elias took every night for 4 months ever actually reached the tissues that needed it. A mineral sitting in a capsule doesn't do anything. A mineral absorbed into your bloodstream and delivered to your muscles and nervous system does. Those are two very different things, and most people, and most supplement labels, treat them as if they're the same. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly which checkpoint is most likely stopping your magnesium from ever reaching your muscles or your brain. And why "I tried magnesium and it didn't work" is almost never actually a statement about magnesium. Let's start with the concept underneath this. A supplement label's dose is not the same thing as an absorbed dose. The number on the bottle tells you how much magnesium was in the capsule. It tells you nothing about how much of that magnesium actually made it past your digestive system and into your blood, muscles, and brain. And that gap, for magnesium specifically, can be enormous depending on a few very specific, unglamorous variables. Before we get into those variables, if you're the kind of person who wants the actual mechanism behind a symptom instead of another generic wellness tip, this is exactly what this channel does every week, so this is a natural moment to subscribe if you haven't already. Now back to the pathway. So here are the 5 checkpoints magnesium has to pass before it does anything at all. Think of it less like a single dose and more like a journey with several places it can quietly stall out. Checkpoint 1. The RDA versus optimal mismatch. The commonly cited recommended dose for magnesium, somewhere in the range of 300 to 400 milligrams, was never designed to represent an optimal amount for things like sleep quality, muscle function, or nervous system regulation. It represents the bare minimum required to prevent an overt, clinically diagnosable deficiency. Those are two entirely different targets. Elias, like most people checking a label, assumed that hitting the RDA number meant he'd covered his needs. He'd actually only cleared the floor, not reached anywhere near a level associated with the specific benefits he was hoping for. Checkpoint 2. The form and bioavailability problem. Not all magnesium is chemically identical once it reaches your gut. Magnesium oxide, one of the most common and least expensive forms used in supplements, has notably poor absorption. A meaningful portion of it passes through the digestive system without ever being taken up into the bloodstream at all. Forms like magnesium glycinate or magnesium citrate are absorbed considerably more efficiently. This means 2 bottles listing the exact same milligram amount on the label can deliver dramatically different actual amounts of magnesium into your system, depending entirely on which chemical form is inside the capsule. Information most people never think to check because the front of the bottle rarely makes the distinction obvious. Checkpoint 3. The gut tolerance ceiling. Here's the mechanism almost nobody names directly, despite a lot of people having experienced it firsthand. Magnesium that isn't absorbed in the small intestine continues on into the large intestine, where it draws water into the gut, which is precisely why very large single doses of magnesium commonly produce loose stools or digestive discomfort. This isn't a side effect unrelated to absorption. It's a direct signal that you've exceeded what your gut can absorb in one sitting, and the excess is being expelled rather than delivered anywhere useful. Taking a large single dose, assuming more at once means more absorbed, frequently just means finding your personal gut tolerance ceiling the uncomfortable way, without any corresponding increase in what actually reached your bloodstream. Now here's where it gets more useful, because checkpoints 1 through 3 compound each other in a specific way. A low RDA level dose, in a poorly absorbed form, taken all at once, stacks 3 separate limiting factors on top of each other, which is close to a worst-case combination for actually correcting a deficiency, even though every individual step looks reasonable on its own. Checkpoint 4. The blood test blind spot. This is the checkpoint that explains why magnesium deficiency is so often invisible on paper even when it's genuinely present. Only about 1% of the body's total magnesium is actually found in the bloodstream. The vast majority is stored inside cells and in bone. Standard blood magnesium tests only measure that small circulating percentage, which the body works hard to keep stable even when deeper cellular stores are running low, by pulling from those reserves. This means a normal blood magnesium result can coexist with a real, functionally significant deficiency at the cellular level, which is exactly the blind spot that left Elias and his doctor with no obvious lab-based reason to suspect magnesium as a factor at all. Checkpoint 5. Cofactors and timing. Magnesium doesn't absorb in isolation. Certain other minerals taken at the same time can compete for the same absorption pathways, and taking a full dose all at once, rather than splitting it across the day, can push more of it past the gut's absorption capacity per sitting, running directly into the checkpoint 3 ceiling. Small practical adjustments here, splitting a dose into 2 smaller servings, being mindful of what else is being taken at the same time, often matter more than the total milligram number ever did on its own. Let's walk through what actually changed for Elias once he understood this pathway, checkpoint by checkpoint. He'd been taking magnesium oxide, at a dose right around the RDA, once daily at bedtime, clearing checkpoint 1 just barely, failing checkpoint 2 entirely because of the form, and quietly bumping against checkpoint 3's gut tolerance ceiling without realizing that was what the mild stomach upset he'd been ignoring actually meant. Switching to a better absorbed form and splitting the same total amount into 2 smaller doses across the day didn't require taking more magnesium. It required getting more of the same amount actually absorbed instead of passing through unused. None of what Elias experienced means magnesium doesn't work, and it doesn't mean he did anything wrong by trying an RDA-level dose in whatever form was on the shelf. That's simply what trying magnesium looks like for most people, because the checkpoints in between aren't explained anywhere the average person would naturally encounter them. So here's what these checkpoints actually mean practically, without turning this into a product recommendation, because that's not what this channel does. For checkpoint 1, know that the RDA reflects a deficiency prevention floor, not necessarily an optimal target, a detail worth discussing with a healthcare provider if you're specifically trying to address sleep, cramping, or other magnesium-related concerns, rather than assuming the RDA number is automatically the right target for your specific situation. For checkpoint 2, understanding that magnesium forms differ meaningfully in absorption is worth knowing generally. Glycinate and citrate are commonly cited as better absorbed forms compared to oxide, but which form and dose is appropriate for you specifically is a conversation for a healthcare provider, not a bottle label. For checkpoint 3, if a magnesium dose is producing digestive discomfort, that's useful information about your personal absorption ceiling in that moment, not necessarily a sign to push through with an even larger dose. For checkpoint 4, if you suspect a deficiency despite a normal blood test, that's a legitimate thing to raise directly with a healthcare provider, since standard blood testing has this specific, well-documented blind spot. For checkpoint 5, splitting a dose across the day rather than taking it all at once is a simple structural adjustment that works with the gut's actual absorption capacity, rather than exceeding it in one sitting. Elias's 4 months weren't wasted, exactly, but they were mostly spent stalled at checkpoints 2 and 3 without knowing it, taking a real mineral in a real dose that mostly never made it anywhere useful. The mineral was never the problem, the pathway was. This is worth naming directly. I tried magnesium and it didn't work, and magnesium never reached the tissues that needed it, are 2 very different statements, and most people who say the first one are actually describing the second one without realizing there was ever a distinction to make. The good news is that once you can see the checkpoints, the dose target, the form, the gut tolerance ceiling, the blood test blind spot, the timing, a stalled supplement stops looking like a mineral that simply doesn't work for you, and starts looking like exactly what it usually is, a specific, identifiable stage in the pathway where things quietly stopped moving forward. A note before we close. This video describes general absorption mechanisms and is for educational purposes only, not medical advice. Magnesium can interact with certain medications and is processed by the kidneys, so anyone considering changes to magnesium intake, especially at doses above the standard RDA, or with any kidney condition or existing medication, should talk to a healthcare provider first.